Thank you. As many may know, I'm with the Gay Liberation Network. And one of the reasons why we partnered with SlutWalk a few years back was that you weren't a single issue movement. You were not just against gender-based violence, but frankly against all violence. And this is particularly important living here in the United States. Dr. King said back in the day, we live in the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. And with drone bombings happening in more than a half dozen countries right now, and of course the recent threat of nuclear war against Korea, whatever you think about that regime, that was not abnormal, by the way. The only thing that was abnormal about that particular threat coming from a United States president's post-1945 was that it was communicated on Twitter as opposed to in back channels. Because if you look at virtually every single president since 1945, they have threatened nuclear war, first strike against any number of other countries, okay? So as horrible as the last few days have seemed to some of us, the threat of attack and invasion of Venezuela, this, in so many respects, was not abnormal. It's been bipartisan violence. And so we're very proud that SlutWalk has partnered against all kinds of violence. Now, this would be an issue for us here in the United States if for no other reason that this country is responsible for almost half of the world's military spending. And I know that there's been a controversy about the issue of Palestine and Israel, and I'd like to say a few words about why the Gay Liberation Network has proudly stood up for Palestinian freedom with our... But we got a particular take on it that I think probably a lot of people have not heard. First of all, we live in a country that gives 3/4 of its military aid to just two nations. First one being Israel, the second being Egypt. And this is no accident because both of them surround Gaza. 3/4 of U.S. military aid go to Egypt and Israel. And Israel spends more, it gets more than twice as much military aid as Egypt. And every other country is far beyond that. Okay, and so we have a particular responsibility in this country not only to speak up against militarism in general, but also the oppression of Palestinians in their own land. Now, Israel is referred to often as a Jewish nation by its supporters, as a Jewish democracy. And let's just take that at its face value. Yet, some people over there apparently have got some problem with free speech, but okay. We in the Gay Liberation Network have proudly spoken out for almost 2 decades now against attempts of the Christian right to turn this country into a Christian nation, into a Christian democracy, for the very simple reason that you cannot be in favor of so-called Christian democracy without leaving everyone who is not Christian out. And by many of these bigoted Christians' definition of Christianity, they leave most Christians out, including LGBTQs who happen to be Christian. So we have long opposed any attempt to turn this country into a so-called Christian democracy or Christian nation for very good reason. And what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You cannot have a democracy where you are defining it by ethnic or religious standards. You cannot have a white democracy, though arguably that's what we've had in this country for so many damn years. We live in the biggest recipient of U.S. military aid by far is also a nation which was polled recently. It's Jewish citizens who found that 48% of them supported so-called transfer of Palestinians from Israel. Okay? That's a polite term for ethnic cleansing. It's a polite term for ethnic cleansing. That is how poisonous the situation in Israel has gotten. And I'm gonna finish up with this because I've been up here for a little bit. And I think it's no accident that many members of the Christian right in this country now count themselves as amongst the biggest Zionist supporters, or Zionists per se, because they favor an ethno-religious state here in the United States for white people, not for people of color, the same way that we are now finding out many of us, many Jewish people in Israel, unfortunately support. You cannot have a democracy which is limited to one race and one religion. It is an oxymoron. And so we are proud to partner with SlutWalk this year for taking a proud stand against all forms of violence, including the daily violence the Palestinians face in Gaza, the West Bank, and indeed in quote-unquote Israel proper today. So thank you, SlutWalk, for taking a very courageous stance. I know you've taken a lot of BS, and that's to put it mildly, including from some of our friends right here today. Yeah. So keep it up. They are losing. This is why they're so desperate to disrupt events like this and Dyke March, because they know they are losing the younger generation, not just of people in the United States in general, but young Jews overwhelmingly are not supporting the Zionist project, and more power to them, and more power to groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, who've been fighting this fight for a lot longer than most of us here.